bringing all these opportunities into your chain is culture. It is a very particular culture you're fostering here, and it's a culture of ravenous opportunism that you may not want to foster, but hey, you are fostering a culture, so knock yourself out.
And we're live once again. It is January, a new year, a better year.
Indeed, it's a good year to be a Solana Maxi.
Yeah. Did you see the Google Trends post I made on Twitter? I think it was yesterday or the day before.
What do you mean Google Trends? What's
What the
Solana?
fuck is that?
It's a Solana hacker house hat.
Oh my god! It looks like you're some kind of like fisherman hat or something.
Actually, I used this when I went to learn how to dive. But anyway, what Google Trends
You
thing? No, go
used
ahead.
it when you learned how to dive.
Well, not when I was diving. When I was in the freaking beach looking at the equipment and stuff.
This all sounds very suspicious. In any case, I checked Google Trends just out of curiosity for Solana compared it to Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin and Ethereum are like flat, and Solana is like a straight line as up as it can go. Like
Interesting.
huge difference. Like it's at the point of maximum search interest it's ever had. So it's at the previous bull market levels, while Ethereum and Bitcoin are flat.
Okay, that's interesting. To throw in some more anecdotal evidence, we are at the stage where people who have been avoiding crypto through the last year, because I'm sure it's the right time to buy, asking me like, "Hey, what is this perpetual protocol thing?" Because I've seen it like on Trade Republic. I'm like, no, if you're asking me that question, you should stay away. So it is clearly we're clearly at the point where normies are getting to look at crypto again. But the fact that they're massively looking at Solana like that is curious, unexpected. I mean, we probably should throw in this chart. I'm gonna capture it and then throw it on the video. But since we're on Pro Solana evidence from this year, the chart from dBridge about bridged amounts between chains, where we see basically massive amounts of money flowing out of Ethereum, mostly to Solana, and by and large not flowing back. That was also something that was quite curious to see, particularly because it's not just because of speed. You're seeing it flowing out of chains like Arbitrum as well.
That was interesting, but I wonder what the amounts actually are. Like, is it like non-trivial amounts?
We can check. It was. It depends on what you define as non-trivial. One moment.
I mean, this is more from just like, look, I hate bridges like with a vengeance, and so it's more like, okay, maybe there's some millions moving around, but like, who cares? It's still indicative of like trends, right? I agree with that, but
what I actually care about is the trend, actually. But yeah, on the bridge itself, and the bridge is still a small protocol as far as I know. There were like 35 millions flowing out of Ethereum or something. But what I actually cared about was where it was flowing to, and are people using it to bridge to other chains entirely different? Are they using it to get stuff out of Arbitrum or Optimism without going through the main chain? This kind of thing. I do agree that I hate bridges in the traditional value honeypot sort of bridge. I like something like this, which is purely about value transfer, which I do think we're gonna need.
Yeah, the issue I have with most bridges is like, oh, you want a bridge? Great. Like, first go through these many steps, make a wallet on both chains, and sure, like, of course you need to do this stuff, but like the UX of it is pretty heavy, and then you need to somehow get the native token from somewhere before you bridge, and that is like just like ugh.
Well, sure, but if you are going to be using a chain, you're going to need the native token, period. That's not an issue of the bridge.
But this is a UX issue that I think there needs to be a solution for, is that like if you want to move to a chain where you don't yet have the native token, um, you should be able to get it somehow without going through a centralized exchange and buying it, when you then may as well not use the bridge at all. Do you
But
see what I
I
mean?
think you could do that with deep bridge. You could bridge value from one arbitrary token to another. The only thing that you care about is that somebody is fulfilling an order at a price. The only thing that you care about is that somebody is materializing a certain number of tokens on that end. And it could be USDC to USDC, or it could be USDC to OP, for instance.
Yeah, right. So you could go direct to a gas token.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that makes a lot more sense. I'm talking about most of the normal bridges. You
Oh,
get a
yeah, yeah.
wrapped version of the token you're transferring on the other end, which you need to trade into something else if you don't want to hold a multi-sig secured token. And then in order to do anything, including trade or transfer, you need gas token, which you do not have. And so you need to acquire that from somewhere. And that whole
It's not
process is
just a
very annoying.
it's not just a multi-sig lock token. You may end up holding a token that don't have no idea what the freak kind of liquidity it may have on the other end, on top of everything else. So yeah, the traditional bridge approach, I agree, is absolutely dumb. But this thing, which is just value transfer, I like hell. I think I just sold myself on contacting the CEO again to see how the round is going.
Well, this is a good start to our year in review. So obviously the year ended very well with Solana ripping, um, and obviously some other things ripping as well. Um, we did just go down a little bit, which was probably for the best for everyone. I had a colleague message me that he thought he was rich, and then he went for a walk. And by the time he got back, he was no longer rich. And I was like, yeah, it's crypto. You better get used to
Welcome to crypto, man.
it. Yeah. Nice to have you here.
So,
Any
that was the other thing with this friend who was asking me about perp. The and he was saying, well, I looked at it when it was like 10% up, and I didn't touch it because it had gone up too much, and I was 25% up more. I'm like, hey, this is crypto. Tomorrow's going to be down like 40-50%. Don't worry about it. Sure enough.
yeah.
Well, I remember when we were talking in Finland, and I think that Seoul was about 75 or something, and I told you that it wouldn't surprise me if we see a correction to like the high 40s. I know usually we didn't get it at the time, but I mean we touched 125, something like that. So I still think that we need things to cool a little bit more. Quite frankly, I don't know. I think Seoul at the very least went up significantly faster than I expected. So I'm kind of like, I'm happy, but I'm kind of
You want it
uncomfortable.
to cool so you can buy.
Oh no, I don't think I would be buying Sol at this. I wouldn't be converting USDC to Sol at this prices for anything other than the profits that I take on things. But I just don't like when things go up too quickly. You usually get whiplash, and when you get whiplash, then things tend to get fucky, considering how much of this stuff happens on chain. So I'd rather things slow down for a little bit. Just hover around, even if you just slide down to the 90s and hover around there for a bit. I'm happy with that. Just take your time, like chill for a bit.
So obviously none of this is financial advice because we have no idea what we're doing. Um, but I'm going to make a prediction, which may be completely wrong, but I think we're not going to chill out. Um, and the reason being, I suspect right now the sort of calculus that people are doing is, okay, what happens in the next bull market? It's incredibly clear that Ethereum will not scale to meet demand in the bull market. Doesn't matter what happens, it's going to be nowhere near, which means that some chain is going to capture massive amounts of demand. And the only chain that's really positioned to do that right now is Sol, or Solana, which in turn, in my mind, this is sort of the Markov chain that I'm building. It means that The Solana market cap, like even though the economics are very different to Ethereum, the Solana market cap will probably be benchmarked to the Ethereum market cap. Like what else would you benchmark it to, right? Like we've seen this happen with like Sui Aptos conveniently always trading at around the same market cap. There's a reason for that. And the same applies to a lot of other chains like that, where they tend to just be in the same ballpark. Investors will look at one chain and be like, okay, then this must be around there as well. Doesn't actually make very much sense since the economics of each chain are very unique and so on. But I do think that's happening. And from that perspective, I would expect Sol to keep going up quite aggressively. People will take profits at some point, but I don't think we're anywhere near a point where people would be like, this is way too much. Like, I'm selling everything. And that's really like, that's the point that I would be wary of, but I don't think we're anywhere close. We're probably multiples from that.
Yeah, I'm generally inclined to agree with the rationale and everything. I do think that I do hope that at the very least January would be a slightly quieter month. Again, mostly because I don't like.
You just want a month off.
Not even, man, but I just don't like the possibility of whiplash too much. Seoul has managed to go almost like an entire year, since like April or March or something, without a major crash or anything like that. And I do like the fact that this bursts, like the one that we had yesterday, put a lot of stress testing on the chain and probably allow them to gather a lot of data that helps them improve things. I just wouldn't want these bursts to happen like every other day or something, because then you're not gonna be doing improvements on optimizations. You're just gonna be putting out fires. So basically, I would like for one of these explosions to happen every few weeks or so, to give them a chance to deal with it, to get us, I don't know, some time for Fire Dancer to get adopted more, this kind of thing. Basically, give the chain a chance to stabilize with the things that are coming out.
So let me just summarize your request here. You're requesting the free market take into consideration the core devs' feelings, basically.
No, I am basically hoping that what happens here is some combination of factors that leads to these explosions not happening. This explosion, whether up or down, not happening. This price explosions not happening nearly as often. I don't think we're gonna get it for all the reasons that we discussed through the last year of how crazy things are likely to get this year. This is just something that I would like. Basically, I am quite used to the market not taking my opinion into account.
Exactly. I'll give you the same response I give my child when he asks for ice cream for the fourth or fifth time, which is that you have been heard.
Yeah, man, we'll see. Like anyway, this is just what I would hope for. I do like the stress testing, and I think you get a lot more stress testing value out of peaks and lows like this. I just wish that this work was happening at a time where we were getting like at the very least a little bit more validator client diversity than what we have now.
Okay, we'll see. But moving on, so we had the idea of doing kind of a review of the previous year. I know it's an incredibly novel idea. We're really gonna stand out amongst all the podcasts in January. But do you want to kind of lay the groundwork? Because I realized when we were talking before we started recording that I've already forgotten everything that happened last year. It's literally
I
like
think we
I'm
can.
trying to go back and it's just blank. I don't know. So do
I
you want to
think we
do
can
the
go
high level
actually with the
recap?
recent ones first. I mean, there were some interesting things happening that I think are bellwether to things that are going to end up coming. Okay, first of all, parentheses, because we haven't mentioned this on this episode, and I think that quite an an amazing change that happened this year was that for whatever reason, I finally got you to stop bitching about space vampires and start reading Peter Watts. And I think that was something that happened this year. So this is like big bad pack. I mean, took longer to convince you to read Peter Watts than it took you to bring you on board with Solana. So that was quite a bit of effort.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you only get the blurb for Peter Watts books, um, they do sound really dumb. Like I'm like halfway ish through the Rifters series, and it's about like people who are modified to become like half amphibian and live at the bottom of the ocean and like start exhibiting fish-like behavior. And it's just like, okay, like if you just hear that, the whole thing just sounds so stupid. And then of course, the I don't know, I don't know what the name of the series is, but Blindside and Echopraxia is space vampires and zombies, which again is like, okay, sure.
I think he called that the Fireflies. I think it is.
Yeah, that's true. Fireflies. Yeah.
Which
Um
also tells you jack shit about what the series is about, by the way.
Indeed.
Considering that the Fireflies was like a 2-second event on the entire series.
Yeah. Yeah, but it kind of set off the events in a
Sure.
way. I mean, Rifters also doesn't tell you anything unless you've read the book and know what a Rifter is. Um Anyway, I'm very glad I finally ended up reading Peter Watts. Actually, so I when you first recommended it, A Blind Sight, to me, I had ordered the book, and then I think tried to read like one page, or like a couple pages, and I was like, nope, can't do it. And then I'd put it down, and when you recommended it for the 10th time or whatever, I had forgotten that I already had the book, and I ordered it again. And when it arrived, um, like when it was at the post office, I found the first one, and I was like, "Wait a minute!" And then I just didn't pick it up and let it go back. Um, anyway, moving on.
Okay, I know what we can do. Actually, let's talk about the things that happened that I would think point to changes in this year. Let's do it that way. So, for instance, we can go into the Jito launch mostly because you mentioned how you were talking a little bit earlier about how people compare market caps, they benchmark basically. And it was rather interesting, as you mentioned, to see Jito's market cap go above go above Lido's, and then kind of basically grab Marnate's market cap by the ears and pull it up as well, just because people were thinking like, okay, I guess if Jito's worth this much, even though again, completely
Must
different
be.
tokens. Yeah, completely different tokens, completely different things. Like Jito has a much more, that's a varied go-to-market approach than Marnate does. It's still interesting to see that we're getting these launches, and we still haven't gotten the Jupiter one, that I do think are going to be massively benchmarked versus the Ethereum ecosystem. And people are going to go like, oh, Uniswap is this much, therefore Jupiter.
Yeah, I think that will definitely happen. Um, what was or one thing that's interesting is I think like one justification for the Jito um like launch going the way that it did is that Lido's market cap, for whatever reason, has been surprisingly low since forever. I think it might have something to do with the original tokenomics they started with or something like that, where it's just kind of like it,
Eh,
considering their position in the industry, I think it should be a lot higher, relative to sort of like Ethereum's market cap. But now Jito's back into the reasonable ranges. Um, and here we go. What reminds me though, so we had that, but I think the it's worth mentioning that I think the Celestia airdrop was one of the best orchestrated
hmm.
airdrops ever. Um, I mean, they did a lot of things very well. First of all, their testnet stuff was pretty well organized. and they got a huge amount of people participating. And then they airdropped to like exactly the right people, which is basically everyone building rollups. um, and I mean that was wildly successful. I would never have believed that Celestia would be at like 11 billion market cap. I mean, I still think that's outlandish. I don't think it's worth anywhere near that. Um, but that must be sort of one of the best orchestrated launches we've seen in quite a long time. You would think that Sui and Aptos would be far beyond Celestia, but no.
Yeah, I really did not follow up on that one since I haven't. Yeah, I just don't have the mental bandwidth, basically, and roll-ups aren't kind of like not my jam. So,
Yeah, but I mean, this is, and then we also had Say, we had Injective,
yeah,
a lot of Cosmos chains. Like maybe if we were to draw one narrative, last year was a big year for the Cosmos ecosystem. Of course, that doesn't translate into value for the native token, but
yeah.
but like some part of the thesis is definitely working because there are really a lot of people building Cosmos chains. Um,
Well,
yeah,
I can't recall if we discussed this on the pod, but Cosmos is kind of like Linux to me. It reminds me of this great line that there's this analyst James Governor that I really like from Red Monk, and I think it was James who said that it's really easy to make money with open source. It's really hard to make money out of open source. And that's the situation that Cosmos strikes me as in being, basically. Like since they are, all credit to them, they don't like force you to use most of their things. Like, hey, here's our toolkit, here's our stuff. Like, knock
yeah,
yourselves out, use whatever components you want. Then people and other chains are really good making money out of Cosmos open source, but Cosmos is not very good at making money with their stuff.
yeah. Like it's sort of like ideologically the right way to do it. Unfortunately, the right way means there's not a clear business model. Like it's pretty indicative that Cosmos, so Atom trades at like 3.5 billion, and I just checked the Celestia price and 13 and a half.
Yeah.
And that's just one chain. There's many chains. Like that is a dramatic difference. And they but it's also like super hard to like force value flow into Cosmos, and I don't know.
Well, and then you have the issue about all the infighting that goes on, which doesn't really make things look good, right? I mean, we keep talking about the foundations that are just sock puppets for the companies behind them, and by and large, you wouldn't want that, but you also wouldn't want people backstabbing each other and saying that other person is an idiot and I'm going to go fork this stuff. And like, it doesn't make the ecosystem look good. I'm not nearly involved enough with Cosmos people to know where all this infighting is coming from. But from the outside, it just looks bad.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Interestingly, like Polkadot, in some ways has taken the other approach to this, which is like, okay, we will force everyone to pay for stuff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that doesn't seem to be working that well either. Uh, like I don't know if you've heard, but like I think last year, uh, Gavin started getting excited about instead of power chains, what if we just had like functions? I can't remember what I think it was called Edge Core or something like that. Um, and like sure, but like is there like could it be that the general idea of having this sort of like cross-chain framework for some things is just not that valuable, because there are other ways of doing it, And no one really wants. Everyone's happy to use your dev kit, or whatever, to make their blockchain really quickly, but no one actually wants to pay you for that privilege. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, this is you could also argue that Cosmos SDK kind of fucks Polkadot's value prop. Like if Substrate was the only thing available, then people probably would pay. But if it's not, then So I've never really been very convinced with that sort of model. Like, and there's some new ones now. Like I've seen some decks for projects that are trying to do something kind of similar, like this kind of like framework that makes all blockchains compatible. And the problem always becomes that like not everyone is going to build on your framework, and so what you end up with is 100 different frameworks. And we have the XKCD standards thing, right?
Yeah.
But what I don't see, or like what's much harder for me to picture in my mind, is what the end state is, because like there's such a people are using Cosmos, people are doing power chains. They don't have a lot of usage, but they're doing them. But then people are also doing their own blockchains, and no one is really like no direction is really winning or losing. It's just like everything is happening, and confuses me a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been really looking at what's going on the Polkadot side of things. Quite frankly, it honestly seems to me to be one of these cases where we've raised so much and money and we have so much in the bank that we just don't particularly care, because they seem to be a little bit aimless, generally speaking. I mean, the numbers that came out of the Web3 Foundation employees, it's like,
Well,
I mean,
Web3 Foundation plus parity was like what, almost 600 people.
it's completely crazy. Anyway, so yeah, I
What?
really haven't been paying that much attention to that side. So not gonna go on a rant about it. Again, I do think that the Cosmos approach is the right one from a purely a builder standpoint, but clearly is not one for, I'm not gonna run in and invest on Atom tomorrow. So happy, but
Yeah.
more than happy to see what people end up building with it in the near future. And I
Yeah.
do think that the approach that these chains are following is a lot much better. If you want to build an app chain or something, I think I would rather go that route than and build yet another Ethereum layer 2 or who the hell knows.
Well, yeah, as a last comment on this, I think one issue with the Cosmos structure is that the Cosmos SDK is pretty restrictive. So the chains you see being built on Cosmos all fit into kind of a very similar format. They like if you were going to do something truly innovative, like if you were trying to be Solana or Sui, or like the reason they're not built on Cosmos SDK is because they would need to rebuild the Cosmos SDK in order to do that. Um, and so I think that at some point becomes a problem where the structure of blockchains changes, like the default changes enough, um, where it just either they come up with a new version of Cosmos SDK, but even more likely they just become kind of incompatible with IBC and things like that. Um, but we'll see. Anyway, I want to move on to another topic which happened last year, though near the end of last year, and that was that the DOJ dropped the lawsuit against SPF
Yeah.
for campaign financing and bribery of Chinese officials. Now, I think this is the most blatant example of like corruption since Epstein from the US. Like, really, the one thing you decide to drop, like, sort of semi quietly after the fact, is the thing that might implicate the people in government in the US. And
Yeah,
what drives me insane about it is that they're not like Like they didn't make a lot of noise about it, but like it was a news story. And then like they don't even care. Like it's so obviously corrupt, and they're just like it's starting to be kind of like having the KGB offices in the center of Moscow. Like they see no risk in just being like, nah, we'll just not prosecute these guys because they're our own. And by the way, we're trying to repair China relations, so we're not really going to go after that shit either. Um, it's like,
Look,
okay,
couple comments on that. First of all, for anybody who didn't follow that, it's not just that they dropped the charges; it was the excuse as well. They dropped the charges with the excuse that prosecuting him for those things would delay sentencing on the main case, and this would cause delays for justice for all the American swindle, et cetera, et cetera. When actually the judge, whose name I forget, for the case where he already has been found guilty, just not sentenced, already said that he would not delay sentencing. That even though SBF's lawyers asked for delay sentencing until the other case was done, he said that the time for having done that motion would have been at the point that he was declared guilty, not weeks after the fact. So sorry, no delay in sentencing. So basically, they're saying that they're going to not try him on that for something that the judge already said is not going to happen, which is it's pretty transparent. But again, I told you, I think, on chat that there was this bit when I think it's on The Light That Failed from Ivan Krastev, where he is talking about election corruption, the blatant election corruption in Russia, and how obvious it is that these numbers are fake. And he makes the point that it's not because they're bad at faking it, but because doing it in that obvious fake way is a show of force. Like, look, we can actually
yeah,
get away with this
like
kind of stuff and we don't care. So there might be something like that going on here.
exactly. But that's what I mean. Like they're not scared of repercussions for that.
It's not
Like,
just that they're not scared, is that doing it this way indicates and shows clearly that we're not scared about, we know you can't do anything to us, basically.
yeah, but that must be like the most incredible swindle of the century. Like, first of all, you have a fucking Bahamas exchange that you like jump through you like open every back door to get like the most regulatory approval in history for some entity in the US, and you have the support of the SEC and all this shit. And you get all your friends like massive donations from the founder and whatnot. The thing literally turns out to be a pyramid scheme. And then you just put the guy in jail and let everyone else walk. Like, what?
Okay, strictly speaking, I wouldn't say it was a pyramid scheme. I said it was just a straight up swindle where he was just taking people's money and funneling the other way. But anyway, that's splitting hairs. I mean, I agree. It is basically a blatant show of force, and we don't give a crap. Period.
Yeah.
And hell, if we prosecute him, that may lead to more clawbacks, and we wouldn't want that shit, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's very tricky. And I don't know. I feel like I bet a lot of that money went to Democrats, and that, like, the Republicans must be fucking furious. Like, what? These guys just get to keep all this shit? And this is, by the way, why I think Trump wins easily. Like, you can do this stuff and you can seem untouchable, but this is how you get Trump into office. Like doing this kind of shit over and over
Okay,
again
I'm not going to
is
go into politics except to say that basically assumes that there's some sort of rational analysis from Trump supporters. So no, look at the terrible thing these people are doing. Anybody who was like, I don't know, man, they could be pillaring SBF and basically throwing out of government anybody who's ever touched SBF money, and still Trump supporters are going to vote for Trump. That will make no difference. the politics in the US has gotten a religious level anymore. It's not rational.
I agree with that, but this, like, my point is that, like, I think a lot of Trump support and maybe more broadly Republican support comes because of a fundamental distrust of the old institutions, and this is like a way of flaunting the power of the old institutions and the corruption in their face, which certainly does not help the cause of the Democrats when they're trying to run with a guy that, like, is very literally has one foot in the grave by now, and can barely do a coherent speech. Um, anyway, we don't need to get into that. This is a new year. This is a year of ignoring U.S. politics.
Okay, let me ask you another related question. Since we're on SBF, one thing that did happen last year is that we ended up with a lot of main characters from the previous bull run either in jail or completely out of the picture. Like Triarbo's Capital, Suzu's in jail, SBF is in jail. I mean, CZ, who was very much a main character, is now out of Binance, and Binance had to pay the massive settlement. Even Barry Sievert is now out of Grayscale, right? Like basically the only main character that we still have from the previous bull run out there, I think, is Michael Saylor. So how do you think, if in any way this is going to affect the next run that we have? Are we going to get new sketchy people like Zuzu, or are we going to get I don't know, people at least trying to play a little bit saner because they have seen how all these people went to jail? I mean, Doc Wong as well. Completely forgot Doc Wong. So what do you think is going to happen? Do you think finders are going to be slightly less ravenous, or they're still going to go, fuck it, it's billions, who cares? I'll take the chance.
Well, first of all, Michael Saylor is back. The knight in shining armor is here. He's planning a share sale for MicroStrategy for, I think it's 216 million. And it must have been on some of like the first episodes when we were discussing that Michael Saylor is the guy that falls on his sword so everyone else can get rich.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's obviously a joke, but like, but as dumb as it is, I think Michael Saylor buying more Bitcoin actually matters quite a lot. But going on to the other things, I really want to believe that there's going to be more credible characters. Unfortunately, I mean, and to some extent that will be the case. So, for example, in Europe and in the US, I think that will be the case. I mean, US is maybe a bit debatable since the SEC seems to think Prometheum is the only credible player. We'll see about that. That's another swindle, um, uh, but like that will force more of that. Like I think there will always be super sketchy characters, but if those sketchy characters are forced to operate like outside the main regions primarily, and not in the way that they've been able to do it now, where you can be in the Seychelles or you can be in the Bahamas and basically still serve, US and the EU, but instead you're like locked out. Not that dissimilar to, for example, how the gambling industry operates. Then the impact of those characters will be a lot smaller. Having said that, it's a global industry. It's still a global industry. I don't think the regulation is yet at a point where it would prevent that kind of behavior.
But it's not
And
necessarily
so
an issue of just regulation, right? It's my question is if you think we're going to get a little bit more rational analysis about the potential for consequences, regulation or not, like say something. So arguably, you could say that Terra wasn't a scam, right? Terra Luna wasn't a scam. It was just a really stupid idea to throw that money at that, and it was even doubly stupid of Doc One to promote it as a safe safe thing, right? So it wasn't a straight up scam like, say, the stuff that was going on at FTX. However, there have been consequences for Dokon for promoting something that was clearly a dumb fuck idea. So, do you think we're gonna get fewer founders promoting dumb fuck ideas just because they think number can go up and off, or is this still gonna be the case?
So I think I think rationality is inversely correlated with volatility.
Okay,
And
fair.
so basically, like, if in percentage terms, the bull market is anywhere near what the previous ones have been, then all bets are off and people will cowboy and go rogue. Um, it could be that that's not the case simply because of the macro environment, higher interest rates. If things are a little bit more tempered on the sort of like asset appreciation side, then I think people are also a bit more rational. It the problem is like meme coins. I don't have anything against meme coins, but they're a good example of like what shady characters see as an opportunity, which is that you can go from zero to billionaire in 6 months. And as
Okay.
long as that's the case, as long as you can go from zero to billionaire by cutting a lot of corners and doing some shady shit, which I don't think, by the way, meme coins specifically necessarily do, but they're an indicator of the size of the opportunity, and then the shady people will try to capitalize on that via any way possible, be it a meme coin or something else. Um, I think as long as that remains true, there will be shady characters. I mean, and they will rise to prominent positions because shady characters tend to be very good at communicating to very regular people. They usually lie, but
Okay.
like they're the only, like, the shady characters are the only ones who are going to go around saying this is completely safe, this is going to make you incredibly rich, and that's all you need to know. And people do respond to that. Like, it makes no sense to me, but like there's a reason why Hex was so fucking popular, even though it was like a full-on scam as far as I'm concerned. um
Okay,
so yeah.
Hex is a little bit of a different case, I think. But it's I think Hex was appealing to a very particular audience, and not gonna go into the whys just because we have like less than 20 minutes. But I think Hex was speaking to a particular subset of people who wanted to follow this character's persona and be like him more than anything else. It was more of a cult of
It's the Andrew
personality
Tate
than.
type cult of personality.
Yeah. Whereas the Terra Luna thing was a little bit different. It was more of a this is a rational investment and this is why kind of thing.
But
Um,
one thing that I think is like, well, I'll make a statement and see what you think. Um, Most of the implosion, or like all of the implosion in this last cycle, was either tied to or directly caused by centralized lending.
ooh, no.
No.
Terra Luna wasn't centralized lending, even though their supposed collateral was held in a centralized foundation, but it wasn't centralized lending.
Terra Luna, I was just thinking about this as well, and I made the statement extreme intentionally, but Terra Luna wasn't. 3 hours, like 3 hours capital, DCG, Gemini, Genesis. Um, what was that one called? Like, if you look statistically,
Block something, block
yeah,
reach,
yeah,
block
block
fight,
five,
whatever.
block five, yeah. Celsius, like most of the blow ups were people FTX, uh, like everything was related to lending stuff against like
FTX wasn't lending.
non-liquid assets. What?
FTX wasn't a lending case. FTX was just a flat out fund malfeasance.
Yes,
And there was fund malfeasance in Celsius and others, but FTX was purely malfeasance. It wasn't lending.
but it was tied to lending because Alameda had lent a huge amount of money against FTT and similar tokens.
It's same company and same owner. It doesn't count as lending. That counts as basically you playing a shell game. It's if they had lent this money to you and then you don't pay it back, then this is a lending problem because it's a different counterparty. In this case, there was no counterparty. It's just moving money from one pocket to the other. That's not lending.
But I'm not saying,
They tried to portray it as lending, but it wasn't.
yeah. But I'm saying like I'm not saying that the mechanics of lending were necessarily the issue, but strangely, like almost all the issues were related to the idea of like we can lend assets against crypto collateral or give margins or whatever. Like a lot of the structures were set up to be lent. But
Look,
this is
we can actually I can bring it back to a simpler way. All the blow up was basically purely bad risk management and lack of transparency. That's what caused
fair.
the blow up.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
and again, the only blow up that wasn't lack of transparency, it was just bad risk management, was Terra Luna.
yeah.
It was pretty
But
transparent what was going on, and we discussed it on the pod quite a few times.
yeah, but the like what I relating to that, do you think the industry has learned from this experience? Because this kind of lending behavior, by the way, like this kind of lending behavior, these kinds of like stable coins secured by like it's tokens with arbitrary value, blah blah blah, hasn't been the case in previous cycles. And so this was kind of the first one where that was had a big role. And do you think that people's risk management practices will improve based on this?
Well, I hope that at the very least the ones for the US based teams will, considering that we have seen, I think Jet Machinsky's already, I'm sure if he got arrested or if there was a warrant out for him. And
He had the hand in his mansion and his yacht.
Okay, there you go.
I
So
just
there,
so it's not a fact. I just a way of depicting his situation.
yeah, okay, let me put it this way. I do think that clearly some teams have gotten the message that lack of transparency and this risk management entanglement is a problem. We have discussed a few times this hybrid sex-tex situation where custody is on chain and is just a settlement that may happen off chain, like the stuff that Cube is doing. And I do think that the industry has learned that this sort of approaches are necessary if you want to avoid this kind of blowups. I don't think that this precludes a new Celsius, basically,
Yeah.
mostly because, again, people will get greedy and the people who lend them money are not really going to have, because of the lack of transparency and because a lot of people are not going to realize that the issues before were due to lack of transparency. They're still going to trust these people to tell them, oh, don't worry, like everything's safe. We have risk management, etc. So,
And people will go after high APY, and that's
yes.
part of the issue. But just sort of moving towards wrapping up, let's touch on the Avalanche Foundation
Yes.
announcing that they're going to start buying meme coins for their quote unquote collection. I mean, okay, what do you think?
What do I think? I think this is adorable. I mean, it's so transparent. It's just beautiful. Okay, so for context, for anybody who is not nearly as deep into the weeds of what has been going on, one of the things, so Solana Foundation or Solana Labs, I can't recall who did it, probably Solana Labs, put out the Saga phone like it came out a year something ago. The Saga phone came bundled every with, like, you could basically receive an airdrop for 30 million bonk. And the phone initially came out about $1,000. Then they cut the price down to about 600, I think. It still didn't sell out. However, bonk started going up in price to the point where the 30 million bonk were worth more than the 600 something bucks or the phone cost. So people saw this as an arbitrary opportunity and started buying Saga phones. This also helped Fuel bring attention to bonk, which kind of had this flywheel effect. So, like, what is it? 3-4 days after there's this announcement about the phone selling out, the Avalanche Foundation starts announcing that they're going to be investing into culture. Investing into culture means that they are going to have a committee of people who are basically going to play kingmaker buying meme coins in Avalanche, I guess, because nothing says culture like three people deciding who gets rich. So I don't know. It is. First of all, I haven't seen such a transparent case of narrative chasing since. Well, actually, I don't even remember when
Near.
was the last time. No, because near doesn't even
Near does
chase.
technological narrative tracing.
Near Near doesn't even do it right away. Near is kind of doing a drunkard's walk of the industry. It's like whenever whatever thing they're doing doesn't work, they can stumble onto something else. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the thing that's hot right now. They just blindly stumble around, it seems. Anyway, Avalanche is narrative chasing. And at the same time, this seems to me like such a, I don't know, shameless thing, basically. It is like if you are an anon looking to launch the next get rich thing, launch it on Avalanche because we may be the ones helping you make rich. It's, I don't know, just putting it that way makes me feel dirty about that whole thing. I'm glad I'm not holding any Avax because I would have insta dumped it at that moment. It's, and
Can you
we have
imagine? Can you imagine when this committee makes a decision on something to buy? How large the incentive is for those people to then go tell all their friends to put 100, 1,000, 10,000
yeah.
bucks into that meme coin, with like a guaranteed increase of I don't know how much. Like I don't know how much money they're actually going to spend doing this, but like I'm sure they have enough money to make any individual tiny meme coin fly.
Yeah.
It's
It's just absolutely shameless, and I
so
quite
bad.
honestly look. This is the kind of stuff that I quite honestly hope does not work for
And
them.
do you want those people on your chain? Like the thing with Bonk, the thing with Shiba, the thing with Doge is that they're like organic projects where
Yeah,
they are a part of the culture because they came from the culture, um, and like they had this like mimetic fitness to survive in that environment, um, and they become part of the culture because they provide some value to that culture. um, but do you want like everyone who just wants to get rich? Like there's no cultural aspect to going to the Avalanche Foundation and being like, please buy my token so that I can sell.
yeah.
uh like it doesn't add anything to that, and they're not builders,
It,
right? Like you want one bonk, that's great, you want one Shiba, and there's a whole bunch of smaller ones and whatever, but you don't want every single person who wants to launch a meme coin to be the users you have on your chain. Like meme coins only
okay.
work in the context of ecosystems that are doing reasonable things, to some extent. Like you could argue that Doge is maybe an exception, but Doge is like just so OG, and they're trying
Yeah.
to build stuff still. So like I don't know. It's just the dumbest fucking thing I've heard in a long
Look,
time.
it's not dumb. It's just shameless. It is shameless and
It's
short
short-sighted.
sighted.
I think it is dumb because I don't think it actually helps them. Like Avalanche will be do fine just because it was like sort of comparable in market cap and narrative to Solana, and Solana's ripping. You know, like it's you
Look,
now
the
need
only
to
thing that
try
I'm
and
gonna
get the most degenerate people possible on your chain. Like what? How are you trying to position exactly?
the only thing that I'm gonna object there, and this is I can hear my mom arguing about this because when somebody said like, "Oh, that person doesn't have enough culture," my mom, who's a social studies professor, would always say, "Culture is anything mankind does, basically." So yeah, bringing all these opportunities into your chain is culture. It is a very particular culture you're fostering here, and it's a culture of ravenous opportunism that you may not want to foster. But hey, you are fostering a culture, so knock yourself out.
I'm not arguing whether it's culture or not. I'm arguing like if you were a chain who was and you were trying to build up to, you know, what they ostensibly say they're trying to build up to, which is like the underlying system for a lot of humanity's financial things, then this would not only be a distraction, it would probably be actively harmful towards your ability to get to that point.
I
Because
agree.
the impression that everyone will get of Avalanche post these kinds of moves, when you go to an Avalanche conference, everyone will be working on a meme coin. And it's like, who exactly is going to build anything real on top of that?
Look, but this is I think this is just a symptom of something that we had already discussed before, where I told you that for me, a huge red flag for any founder, and it was a red flag that I actually ignored with SBF, kind of because I was busy when this started happening, is when they start shit talking other founders. When instead of being able to argue for why your thing is good or why your thing is fit for a particular use, the only thing that you do is trash talk other founders and other projects, then that means that you really don't have a clue of what your thing is. And frankly, Avalanche's founder has been shit talking, pretty much doing nothing but shit talk other projects for the last few years. So this is likely just a symptom of the same issue. They have no idea what to do with this thing.
There we go. Um, we'll wrap it up on that delightfully positive note for the year to 2024. I hope you all have a great year and see you in the next episode.